So it is my honor and privilege to be able to introduce our speaker, an old friend, very accomplished, from our area, a Yinzer, right? Have to call her that. And I have her bio here. It's the same bio that you have in your program, so I probably shouldn't just read that, but I'll just a couple highlights from it. Salena Zito, veteran political reporter, more than 20 years of award-winning journalism. In her trusty Jeep, she's clocked well over 400,000 miles on her odometers and refuses to travel on interstates. I love this. She doesn't fly from place to place, what the liberals call flyover country, right? She actually drives from place to place, does her reporting on the ground, on site, old-fashioned, right, the way the reporting journalism ought to actually be done. So she drives from place to place. She doesn't use interstates, doesn't use highways, takes back roads, which is why she knows so much about what's going on in everyday America. Speaking of which, in 2016, she famously coined the phrase for the 2016 election in which she predicted that Donald Trump would win Pennsylvania, right, and thus win the election. Everybody thought she was crazy when she said, including me, by the way. I thought you were crazy when you said that. But she famously said of Donald Trump, the press takes him literally, but not seriously. His supporters take him seriously, but not literally. And I think to this day, that describes Donald Trump's opponents and his supporters, right? The opponents take him literally, but not seriously. Supporters take him seriously, but not literally. She's a national political reporter currently for the Washington Examiner, special contributor to the Washington Post, as well as for the American Spectator, my publication. She has contributed to the Atlantic, Wall Street Journal. She's taught journalism at Harvard, which I think is fantastic. A Yinzer at Harvard. You should do a book called A Yinzer at Harvard. Washington and Lee, Hillsdale. She's the author of the book, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition Reshaping American Politics, which was very prophetic, terrific work. Also, It's Complicated, How Our Nation is Coming Together and Falling Apart. And her latest book, of course, is Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump, which was published in July 2025. So last summer, became a #1 New York Times bestseller. That's what she's going to talk about today. Just a few personal stories. I met her through the Tribune Review when she and I both started writing as columnists, as a reporter for Dick Scaife's Pittsburgh Tribune Review. One of my favorite stories, she has these moments of always kind of being there for historical moments. I don't want to say like Forrest Gump, it'd be Forrest Gump, all right, okay. And one of my favorite stories, I was going to ask her to tell it, but maybe I'll just briefly say it, but hopefully I'll get it right. The morning of 9/11, right, she was on the field at Heinz Field, which had not yet opened. You guys were waiting to open it, and I think she was in charge of running tickets for the Steelers, right, making sure that all those people who had lifelong season tickets back to Three Rivers Stadium would keep those tickets. And she was down on the field, I think, with Mr. Rooney himself, and a plane comes flying over the stadium, right, low altitude, and she said, Mr. Rooney stopped and paused and said, flying too low, wrong flight pattern, right? Just kind of shook his head. That's all he said. He was a pilot, and he kind of just shook his head. And then a few minutes later, she got news that plane crashed. It was Flight 93, right? So it went right over. And if you look at the flight pattern as well, it came from, I think, Boston, wasn't it? And then it went right along like I-80 and did like a turn up around right past Grove City, came right over us as if it was going to Cleveland, right down through that area. So she always has a way of being in like these historic moments, which leads to Butler, July 13th, 2024. And I was supposed to be there that day. My 16-year-old son was there. And he's texting my wife and I, I'm getting closer to the stage, I'm getting closer to the stage, getting closer to the stage, all excited. And then when the moment happened, we were watching it live on Newsmax, my wife and I, because Newsmax covered the whole thing. And she just fell to her knees and started praying. And at that moment, we heard nothing else from our son for a half hour. And apparently, I guess they must have scrambled the cell service, I don't know. And so that was a frightening 30 minutes. And of course, Corey Comparatori lost his life there. We knew the president was okay because he jumped up right away with a fight. And I remember one of the first photos that I saw was Salena ducking, right? And I thought, well, of course she was there. And well, she'll tell you all about that. But she was there, my son was there, I had a number of students there, a bunch of people in this room. You mind a show of hands? How many people here? Yeah, all right, at least a dozen people were here for that. And I'll say this one last thing here before she comes up. This great book that she's written on this subject, and by the way, Butler is my hometown. So I was born in Pittsburgh, McGee Women's Hospital, went to Butler High School, graduated class of 1984, Butler High School. But they are making a movie on this. And is Scott Sander here? Scott, you should be here. Where is he? He's probably out raising money for the movie. He comes to these events often, Ponce Productions, so father and two sons. They have their office on South Craig Street in Oakland and Pittsburgh, and they also have offices in LA. They are making a movie on this book. And they've chosen the actress to play you, right? So it's really exciting. This is in motion. And I don't know when, we were talking at one point about the film being released this fall, but July 2027. Yeah, so she was there, she turned it into a book, now it's going to become a movie. Really cool stuff. All right, here she is, Salena Zito.
Hi, thanks everyone for coming. Who else from Butler? Raise your hand. Awesome. Yay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself first and how we got to that day in July of 2024. And then I would love if people have questions that they want to ask me. So I was born on the north side of Pittsburgh. That's where I grew up. My family still lives on the north side of Pittsburgh. I went to community college and I famously dropped out. So that I had a New York Times #1 bestseller is a pretty big accomplishment. I worked for the Pittsburgh Tribune. I should back up. I've done pretty much everything before being a reporter. I worked as a waitress, as someone who worked for Alcosan, so that was kind of a dirty job. I was a cafeteria lady. I worked at a daycare center. So I've always kind of understood the importance of place and the importance of hard work. And I recognize it in the people that I interview. So that has always been incredibly meaningful to me to understand people, because the people in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan, North Carolina and Florida, these are the people that decide elections. So if we don't understand the people that decide them, and we spend too much focus on the people that write about them in Washington and New York, we really don't understand what's happening in this country. So I'm going to just take you back a little bit before we get to that day. I worked for the Pittsburgh Tribune Review for 15 years. I loved my job. I covered national politics. I had a owner of the paper, Richard Mellon-Scaife, who really was wonderful in letting me cover politics in the way that I thought was appropriate and captured what was happening in the country. I can remember the first couple of times they sent me on the press plane and the press bus. That was not for me. Everybody was writing the exact same story. And nobody was really getting the information from the people that were going to events. Going to, at that time, that was John Kerry and George W. Bush, and then Barack Obama and John McCain, right, and Hillary Clinton. You really didn't understand how voters felt. You just understood how the candidate felt. And I didn't think that captured understanding what was going to happen. So I began early on in my career, as Paul pointed out, I don't fly. Now, not just on press buses, I don't fly, period, because it's annoying. It's really annoying. Like if I would have to cover something in Iowa, Well, we don't have a hub in Pittsburgh, so that meant I went to Detroit first, or maybe Milwaukee, and then got to Iowa. 90% of the time, the plane was delayed, which meant I missed my connecting, and then get there 14 hours later, and I could have drove, so I'm not flying either. It's just a waste of my time. But I also discovered in that decision, between driving from Pittsburgh to Iowa, and you go on Route 30 rather than 80 or 90 or the Turnpike or whatever you may choose, all of a sudden you see a whole different world. You see the people that decide elections, not just in our state, but also in Ohio, in Indiana, in Iowa. And so that's how I started covering American elections. And it proved to be incredibly helpful, not just in presidential elections, but also in midterm elections. And so that's how I started to do it. And when I cover an election, I don't just like go that day. I usually go a couple days ahead of time. I don't stay in a hotel. Like, where are we? Marriott? Yeah, no offense, Marriott. But I don't stay in a Marriott. I usually stay in like a bed and breakfast. Why? Well, well, first of all, the breakfasts are amazing. But second of all, you're staying in an establishment that is owned by a small business person. Nobody knows where the bodies are buried better than a small business person, right? And so you get to understand, like, where do I go? Where do I hang out? Who do I talk to? So then you go to bowling alleys and churches and diners and soccer fields and football fields, right? And you get to, and manufacturing plants, and you get to know and understand what is making this community, what's the heartbeat, what's important to them. Because I think what my profession misses, and a lot of our cultural curators miss, is the importance of place in people's lives. How many people live, raise your hand please, live within 50 miles of where they grew up? You proved my point. 8 out of 10 people in this country live within 20 miles of their home. Place is important. More important than we understand even ourselves. But we are in particular in Pennsylvania, we're very rooted to where we're from. And that often decides how we vote, and we don't even realize it. But what person is speaking to what matters to our place? What person is speaking to what matters to my family, to my community, to my church? To the kids' Little League team. Like, place really, really matters. And our cultural curators have long gone away from understanding place. And what do I mean by cultural curators? Corporations, academia, institutions, Hollywood. They really don't understand place. And they treat those of us who live outside of the major places, the decision making, our cultural curators basically live in the same 10 counties across in the country, surrounding DC and New York and LA. These are places that are a center of power and wealth. That doesn't make them bad, but they see the world very differently than we do. Very often they don't know someone who owns a gun. They don't know someone who knows how to use a gun. They don't know anyone that sits in a pew every Sunday or goes to holds a Shabbat, right? They don't understand them. And so when it comes to selling them something, if they're a company, think Bud Light, that was really dumb. Or even the NFL. Does anybody know where the NFL's headquarters are? Manhattan. Not only Manhattan, Park Avenue. Like, what does Park Avenue have in common with a guy who paints his face black and yellow every Sunday and either sits in his man cave or goes to a game? Nothing. So when the NFL made that decision in 2016 about allowing Colin Kaepernick to kneel during the national anthem, they weren't thinking about the millions of fans who live in the middle of the country. They were thinking about the people that they have to go to a cocktail party with every Saturday night. And how would they view that? And I've always said that if our cultural curators, and also in media too, our cultural curators had more people in their board of directors or in their decision making that went to a state school or a community college or a trade school, who grew up in Peoria, like they would have someone in the room that could help give a perspective that is as important as a Harvard degree, right? We don't balance that out in our decision making in our cultural curators. And that's the challenge within my profession. As local news organizations have died off, people have been replaced in getting their news, consuming their news from national news organizations, which are located where? New York and DC, right? And these reporters, I'm not saying they're bad, because they're not bad. They just don't know you. They don't know anybody like you. So when they come in to cover you, there is this sense of otherness when they view you. And so I noticed this in the first Trump rally that I covered. I think it was Youngstown, Pennsylvania. I know Youngstown. I've been around since Black Mondays. Anybody know what Black Monday is? That's the day in 1977 when every steel mill up and down the valley closed, shut down. 15,000 people lost their jobs. Okay? Everyone's like, why is he going to Youngstown? And I'm like, I know why he's going to Youngstown. These are the people that both parties have left behind, right? But these are also the people in the Mahoning Valley, Trumbull County, Warren, all those counties. These are the people that decide elections. And it's right beside Butler County. It's right beside Beaver County. It's right beside the outskirts of Allegheny County. So I watched this and I understood what was wrong. I stayed overnight, a couple nights in Trumbull County, just walking around, talking to people. Not that it's that far from where I live, right? But I watched the other reporters. They come in on a plane together, and then on a bus together. They're all in the same social networks, same social circles. They all went to the same really, really good schools, not community college like I did. And I watched them approach the event. Now, I'm watching the event. Anybody here ever go to a Trump event? It's a lot of fun. And people are really happy. It's sort of like, who's the parrot guy? What was his name? Yeah. So it's a festival of happiness, right? People are happy. But they roll in, they don't get to meet and talk to people. They don't see people tossing a baseball or a beach ball across. They don't see families there. They roll in 15 minutes before the event starts. They pick out the 10 most peculiar people, because there's always peculiar people, that are attending. And they interview the same 10 people and take pictures of them. And then they pick out the 4 most ridiculous things that Trump would say, which mostly were jokes. And then I would watch this on television, and I was thinking, they're all writing the same story. They all picked out the weirdest people there. They all picked out the same goofy things that he said, and they missed everything else. They missed talking about the dignity of work. They missed talking about, I see that your community has died, and I want to try to make it better. And so that's when I understood why I was a little bit different than everyone else. Because I'm better, I'm just from here. I have a sense of place. So in 2016, I was working for the Tribune Review, loved my job, and I drove across the country, US 30, which goes from New York to California. I stuck with the Philly to Colorado and to understand everything. And it took about 2 weeks. And I came back and I wrote, the selection's over. y'all just don't know it yet. Like, have you been to Wisconsin? Have you been to Michigan? Ohio? Remember, Ohio voted for Barack Obama twice. Indiana voted for Barack Obama twice. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. You know, it was unheard of. So for me to say that, as you can imagine, it made my life interesting. Now, it had nothing to do with me supporting him or not supporting him. That's not my job. My job is to say, this is what's happening. But as I'm driving along the road, I don't see the signs you get from your local Republican committee, like Donald Trump for president. No. People were writing on the side of barns. I saw someone do it on the side of a horse. You know, it was everywhere. It was next level enthusiasm. And it was people from across the political scope, right? And it was people that have felt disappointed by both parties. And it was a really interesting coalition to me. It wasn't just traditional Republicans. It was also, and it's in my first book, I break it down into 7 different archetypes, but it was evangelical voters. I remember covering Trump in Iowa, and I don't know what you know about a caucus, but a caucus is basically a room like this, and it's basically done by hand or standing up, right? So I'm in this caucus in Davenport, Iowa. It's like 0 degrees out. And a lot of the older guys would write their names, like they usually pick 4 people. And I was talking to a group of farmers, and their first choice was Ben Carson. I'm like, okay, why? Well, he shares our values. A second person, Bobby Jindal. Why Bobby Jindal? Well, he shares our values. And we like him. It's very likable. Next choice, the third choice was Ted Cruz. We don't like him, but he shares our values. And then the last one really hit me. It was Donald Trump. And I'm like, how do you pick a 3-time married, Playboy dating, Howard Stern regular, right? Like, oh, he's just mean enough to take on Hillary. And it clicked. If he's getting evangelical voters, there is a different kind of coalition forming here. It's not just traditional Republicans. It's evangelicals, it's Hispanics. They also have the same sort of sentiment towards them. People tend to forget that Hispanics are very traditional, very Catholic. A lot are very, very evangelical, but family and faith in the family nucleus are very important to them. And so all these sort of cultural things that were happening were not their cup of tea. They left countries like that to and heavy-handed government. So in July, that was July of 2016. In September of 2016, I lost my job. There was a buyout. Basically, they said, you should take it. I'm like, okay. I'm glad I did, because anyone who didn't take it over the age of 50 lost their job. So between July 2016 and September 2016 and November 2016, I worked 4 jobs, driving across the country, didn't make like below poverty level money, right? And my first interview after losing my job was with Donald Trump, and that's when that happened. And that was September 2016. And they called me as I'm walking out of the newsroom, like weeping because I lost my job. And I was called by the campaign manager, and they said, you have an interview with President Trump in 2 days. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, thank you. And I hung up. I'm like, I don't have a job. So I called the New York Times. They said no. I called the Washington Post. They said no. I called Politico. They said no. Believe it or not, it was the Atlantic that said yes. And by the way, I didn't pay any money, like $200. It was terrible. But I wanted to see this election through. But it was in that interview I said to President Trump, look, my observation is voters take you seriously, but they don't take everything that you say literally. Mostly because they've grown up with this guy. Like, he's on TV. They know he loves to do the throwaway line. right? It's a joke. It's a joke. But my profession took everything that he said literally and nothing that he didn't seriously. And that was the fatal mistake, because he didn't take you guys seriously. Donald Trump did not start this coalition. You all did. He's just the result of it. He's a result of disappointment in the Republican Party. He's a result of disappointment in the Democratic Party. It's just a result of the disappointment of all of our cultural curators. They have looked past you and not seen you and not listened to you and did not hear you. In November of 2016, it was the night before the election. I interviewed Mike Pence on the tarmac in Pittsburgh. And I went home, I wrote the story, I think it was for Newsmax. And then I sat on the steps in my house and I cried. Because I knew that I just interviewed the next Vice President of the United States. And I won't have a job tomorrow. So my last job was with the New York Post election day. I first went to the Democrat headquarters, which was at the IBEW in Pittsburgh on the south side. They're like all happy, and I'm like, hey, I'm at the wrong place. So I hightailed it to the Republican one, which is in the South Hills in Pittsburgh. I think it was called the Crown Royal or something like that hotel. And they were sort of nervous and pacing. And there was a lot of national reporters there. And I would call them the celebrity reporters, and then me. I had identified and understood a very important thing about that night. In 2012, Mitt Romney only lost 10 counties by 2,000 votes. They weren't Philly, they weren't Pittsburgh, but they were everywhere in between. And what's something that people have missed for the past, since 1992 about Pennsylvania, is they always say, Democrat won, next state. What they had missed is, between 1992 and 2012, our state became 0.4% more Republican every 4 years. But they didn't pay attention to that. I did, because I live here. And Bill Clinton won with, I forget how many, 28 of our counties. By 2012, Barack Obama only won 13. Something was happening. I identified 10 counties where there could be a change, and I watched them on that election night. If Donald Trump just got 2,000 more votes in those 10 counties, he'd win. It didn't matter what happened in Philly and Pittsburgh. So all the other reporters are like watching the results coming in from Philly and Pittsburgh. I saw my 10 counties. I filed the story at 8:48, 8:45, and I told my boss at the New York Post, this is over. Because if he's won the counties he needed to win generously, and if he's won Pennsylvania, that means he's won Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida. Why? Because Pennsylvania's 5 points more Democratic than those states. So my story was done. I knew it was over at 8:45. The next morning, I didn't have any jobs left. Anybody follow me on Instagram or Twitter? You know that I bake a lot, like a lot. I have 4 grandchildren. Each of them has a KitchenAid. If you ever see me on Fox, there's a KitchenAid, 4 KitchenAids, and each grandchild has a KitchenAid. So I arrogantly believed that I was going to, I'm a good baker. There's a bakery right beside my house. It's when I lived in Mount Lebanon. They're going to hire me. So I was going to get dressed up, and I'm going to interview for that bakery job next door to my house, because there's no one that was going to hire me in news. And I knew how all the people that I covered, in particular in the steel and coal industry, felt. I was 57 years old and nobody wanted me anymore. So I started walking to the bakery, and I get a phone call from Jeff Zucker, who used to be the president of CNN. He said, we want you to be on with Jake Tapper today. I'm like, what did I do? Because that's what I thought. And he goes, no, you're the only reporter that got the election right. And we want you to talk about it. Oh, and by the way, we want to hire you. So that was before CNN lost its mind. So they hired me that day. The New York Post brought me on as a columnist, and the Washington Examiner hired me a week later. Within a month, I had a deal for the book, The Great Revolt. And so I just sort of wanted you to understand where I came from. Nothing has ever changed other than I changed zip codes from Mount Lebanon to Westmoreland County because COVID. I wanted to be able to take a walk outside and not be yelled at. So let's fast forward now to 2024. 2023, actually. So President Trump has lost in 2020. And I interviewed him numerous times, but I hadn't interviewed him since he lost. And the people around him had switched around, and I didn't really know them. And so in 2023, I'm going to cover, the primaries. And drove down to Florida to interview Ron DeSantis. Apparently, President Trump didn't like that. And when the story came out, he put on Truth Social, fake news reporter Salena Zito. That was fun. But I didn't get mad because that's him, right? I knew him. I've covered him forever. An entire year would pass until February of 2024. And I'm at my daughter's cabin in Ligonier. And we're looking out, they're at the top of the mountain. We're looking out, and we see this big black thing of smoke. Was East Palestine. I immediately got in the car and I gotta go. I gotta go cover this. My family is from East Palestine. My great-grandfather, John Eister, John Elster. Yeah, there's Eisters in Elster. He ran for state rep there in 1896 as a free silver Democrat. He got 12 votes. But this is where my mom spent her summers. They lived in New Waterford, was next door. East Palestine had a swimming pool, so I knew East Palestine all my life. Within days, first of all, no one showed up from the Biden administration. Not only did they not show up, they didn't even acknowledge it in the press briefings. And I was there every day, and I will tell you, you got sick. You didn't feel good, right? I was walking through as we say around here, the cricks, and with my hip boots on, and with J.D. Vance, who was a brand new senator at that time. And I got word that President Trump was coming. This is February of 23? Oh, it was 23. Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped a year. It was February 23. And it was a week after he called me fake news reporter, Zito. So I put my hair in a baseball cap and put sunglasses on, even though it was sleeting out, and just sort of watched him. I watched him walk. He had galoshes on. He rolled up with an 18-wheeler filled with water. There's two 18-wheelers. And he just talked to people and basically said, I hear you. I'm not going to forget you. And I wrote that day, because at that moment in 2023, he was far behind in the polls to Ron DeSantis in the first New Hampshire poll, in the primary. People had been a little bit cranky with him. He had, they weren't happy about how those Senate races happened in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Georgia, right? And they didn't like the candidates that he had picked. So they were a little bit irritated with him. He shows up in East Palestine, and I'm like, this is his pivotal moment. If everything changes, it happened here, and it did. These are the people that are just like us. right? This is a small village of 4,000 people, and their lives are changed forever. And so it took him another year, and I'm one day watching my 4 grandchildren, which, by the way, are feral. So I don't know, did anybody see them? My grandchildren with the president I took him to the White House in December. And my little grandson, there's 4, my grandchildren, there's 4, that Rocco was 2 at the time. He's handing them out coins. And Rocco said to him, "What's your name?" You should look it up, it's really funny. And without skipping a beat, President Trump said, "My name is Donald." And so now every time Rocco sees him on TV, he goes, "That's my friend Donald." So, so they're feral. I mean, they're just wild. They're awesome. That's how I like them, feral. That's how my children were. And so I'm watching my grandchildren, and his phone number comes up on my phone. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, hello? And of course, you know how children are. As soon as you pick up the phone, they take it next level. They think this is the time we scream and yell. This is it. So he's laughing, and he's like, he just wanted to, it was his way of saying, it's good, we're good. We talked for about 20 minutes. That was in April of 2024, June of 2024, I find out he's coming to Butler. And I put in a call to Susie Wiles and Chris Lasavita, who were running the campaign. If anybody doesn't know this, Chris Lasavita is from McKeesport, and he is the most Yinzer ever. That was pretty cool. So I'm going to interview the president. It's July 2024. My daughter is a photojournalist. Has anybody got the book? Okay, that photo she took 2 minutes before he was shot. That day was wild. Now, as a reporter, you always know, and you can attest to this, whatever you think you're going to do that day, it's not going to happen that way. So I bring my daughter with me, Shannon. We take my son-in-law, who's a private equity guy, but we vainly believed, because it was going to be like 300 degrees that day, we'll make him carry everything. And I'm going to interview him before the rally, and then we won't be so hot and sweaty. That was over in 5 minutes, right? We get out to Butler. I'm skipping over a lot because of the book. Hopefully you guys will read it. But we get out to the rally, and the first thing that, probably 1 hour in, Michel Picard III, remember that name, it's an important name. Michel Picard III is the campaign advance man. He pulls me over and he goes, "Salena, so something has changed, and we're going to have to move the interview." I'm like, there it is. He's still mad at me. I'm still fake news reporter Salena Zito. He goes, no, we're going to do it after. We're going to do it after. I'm like, okay, fine. And then about 2 hours later, mind you, you had to be there for like 8 excruciating, sweaty, hot hours. I get a phone call from Susie Wiles. I'm like, there it is. It's over. They're canceling it. And the call, she says, "Hey, Salena, we're going to have to change some things." And then the call drops. I'm like, well, it's over. And she calls back like 3 minutes later, and she goes, would you mind flying to Bedminster and interviewing him on the plane? I was like, oh, okay. Can my daughter and son-in-law come? Yeah, sure. I'm like, okay. My daughter calls her in-laws. They're all good with the 4 feral children. By the way, not as good as I am. I just want to point that out. And by the way, she would attest to that as well. And then about 5 minutes, like you could tell if you've ever gone to a Trump rally. There's a playlist that goes in a certain way. And I know we're getting close to when he comes out. The plane has landed. He's in the back. He's doing what they call the click room, where they meet local people, shake hands, law enforcement, that kind of thing. All of a sudden, Michelle Picard III grabs me and says, "It's go time." I'm like, "What, it's go time?" Like, I thought we were doing this after. So he grabs me and my daughter and my son-in-law, there's like this teeny tiny little pathway that you would never see in a rally, but it's meant for security. Also, apparently me, it's fenced off, and we like go through this maze. We get to behind the stage, and I said to Michelle Picard, "Where are we doing this?" And he goes, "I have no idea. Hold on." And so there's a blue curtain. The president's on the other side. What I didn't know at the time was he was talking to Mark Fogel's mom. If you remember Mark Fogel, he was the one that was in prison in Russia. Mrs. Fogel was from Butler. So Michelle Picard comes back out and he goes, "Yeah, we're still going on the plane. He just wanted to say hi to you." I'm like, "Okay." And my daughter says to me, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And so we go around the curtain. So this is in the book. If you ever see him in me interview, it's always, "Salena, you have the best hair in America." If you could see it now, humidity is not my friend. It wasn't that day either. And we just start talking about our grandchildren. That's mostly what we ever talk about, is grandchildren. And he says, "I'm looking forward to the interview. See you on the plane. See you after the event." Now, at this point, Lee Greenwood's song has started. They're like, "Okay, you're just going to have to go in the buffer." The buffer is that area around the stage that separates the president from the crowd. It's usually for Secret Service, but also photojournalists. So they're like, "Just follow him out and make your way to the other side." And so that's what we did. And you look at the cover of my book, there's the photo right before he's shot. He does two things that are very, very different. He, when he gets out there, a chart comes down. It's never a chart. If there is, I shouldn't say never, there's rarely a chart. If there is a chart, it comes at the end, and oh, by the way, it goes on the other side. So he was just a little, I mean, if anybody was there, you remember, he's like, "Oh, the chart." That came down completely accidentally, or, as he says, the hand of God. Then he does something that he never does. When he's talking to you, it's like this. It's the way I'm talking to you, right? We're locked in. We're looking at each other. He never turns away. He never turns his neck away. He'll look, if there's an audience over there, yes, but he never turns his neck away. Chart comes down. I say to my daughter, "What does he think he is? Like Ross Perot? What's going on here?" And then he turns his head, and the 4 shots go right over our head. I knew exactly what it was. I'm a gun owner, right? There's a lot of people that didn't. And I kept working, and so did my daughter. She kept taking photos. I had my recorder on, so I have the entire conversation with the Secret Service recorded that he has. And then the second 4 shots come over, and then Michelle Picard, like, there's this famous photo of him on top of me holding me down. He like takes me out and lays on top of me until there's an all clear. He's not a Secret Service guy. He's just a campaign, he's just a kid, right? I watch him get down, but I notice that he doesn't fall down. He takes himself down. I see the blood squirt off of his face. I see Corey is shot. I could see everything. I hear his conversation with the Secret Service. His shoes have been knocked off. He does not want to get off that stage without those shoes. To the point where I almost found myself laughing, listening to him. He's like, "I need my shoes." And at one point, this agent said, "Fine." Which was great comic relief. And then I see that he stands out. He does the fight. He goes right past me. As he goes past me, there is an agent in full camo with a gun pointed right at my head. Because they don't know. They don't know if someone else is there. He leaves. The next morning, And they kept me there for a couple hours. I think they thought I had been injured just because of how the agent was, or how Michelle was on top of me. The next morning at 6:45, I get a phone call. Guess who? Donald Trump. Before I could even say hello, he's like, Salena, are you okay? Is Shannon okay? Is Mike okay? I'm like, how did you even remember those names? And it was in that moment that I swore at the president. I won't swear here, I promise. I said, are you bleeping kidding me? You've just been shot. I'm fine. He proceeded to call me 7 times that day. We had the most in-depth conversations about faith, about God, about the hand of God, and it's all in the book. But the last conversation we had, I said to him, I gotta ask you, why did you say fight, fight, fight? He goes, oh, that's easy. I was not Donald Trump in that moment. I represented the presidency for the ages. The presidency from Washington on. We are supposed to be pillars of strength to show that we endure, to show that the country is strong. I'm representing the heart and soul of the country. I can't have them take me off without my shoes on. I can't have them, he goes, I cannot have them take me out on the stretcher. What's that going to do to the people that are there? What's that going to do to the people that's watching? It could change the course of everything. I have to show that we are strong. Then you better buy the book. Does everybody have this? Everybody got your phone? You can go on Amazon. It's on sale right now. To my great shock, it was debuted number 1 in the New York Times bestseller. That is not bad for a kid from Perry High School. Let me give it up back there. I see a Perry High School grad. Same class. He was way smarter than me. That was not what I expected. But the book is also a lot more than just about that day. It's about why Butler. Why has he come to Butler? There have only been 2 United States presidents that have ever campaigned in Butler, Pennsylvania. They are JFK and Donald Trump. Ever. Now, other presidents have visited either before or after their presidencies, but no one thought that Butler, Pennsylvania was that important. Nobody saw Butler, Pennsylvania. Nobody saw the Butler Works. Nobody saw the former Pullman. Nobody understood the people and the farms there. And just sort of the interesting coalition that is Butler today. And so I think that's really important in talking about place and the importance of place in American politics, but also the importance of place in our corporations and Hollywood and academia and in our institutions and in media. We need to put more of a focus on the people and less about the flash. So, who wants to ask questions? You want me to get down?
Yeah, we got plenty of time for questions. If I could just ask this, it is so striking though that he said fight, fight, fight. And at that moment when my wife drops to her knees and just starts praying because she's worried about our son, right? And then Trump jumps up and she like dashed into the other room and started trying to text him. And I said, and amid our anxiety, I started laughing. I said, he just said fight, fight, fight. And the way that it just, I mean, my son would later tell us that there could have been complete anarchy and chaos at that moment. He kind of held everybody together.
He held everything together.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why do you think the words fight, 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 though? I mean, just that particular, I mean, my son says, because he's a fan of, what do you call it?
You have whatever.
UFC.
But he's just a fan of sports and of the country, right? If you ever have an in-depth conversation about him, he loves the competitiveness. He loves the sort of warrior spirit of the country. And that transcends into sports. He loves sports. He loves that. And so it didn't surprise me that he said that. Even when we were talking, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Yep.
Iconic
Yeah, it is. And by the way, everyone says that's when he won that election. No. He won it in East Palestine, hands down. Because who remembers the Billy Joel song, Allentown? Okay? Everybody sang that song, and not everybody lived in Allentown, but they saw themselves. They saw their community. They saw what was happening to the country, what was happened to American industrialization, what happened to the country that made things, right? And built communities with churches and social networks and fraternal organizations like the Elks, right? They saw themselves, and that's what happened with East Palestine. People saw themselves, and they're like, the president can't even, meaning Biden, he can't even say something at the podium about East Palestine? What is that? I understand that East Palestine will likely never vote for a Democrat, but when you're president, that's not the way you do things. Okay, and go ahead. Yeah, you can stand up.
This is slightly off topic, but it's my favorite chapter in your book. What is the state of the small town newspaper? I mean, I grew up in a small town. I love that newspaper. It's really sad what's happening.
Yeah, I just did a story on the Derrick a couple months ago. The Derrick, if anybody's familiar, is the Oil City newspaper, was one of the oldest newspapers in the country, and did some of the best reporting about the oil boom that happened in Titusville and Oil City. It's in bad shape. It really is. It's not in good shape. And, what is gone from the American newspaper is the benevolent owner, right? The wealthy, benevolent owner who just wanted to have something good for their communities. And I don't know, we lose 100 newspapers a day in this country. There are counties that have entire counties that don't have news organizations. And I think what's missing from my profession are more people that aren't from the areas that they covered, as I talked about earlier.
Just an observation, kind of a similar type thing that you have seen, I remember 2015, they were asking a bunch of candidates, to sign up, who would you want to have president? And I signed up for Trump. And the people asked me, no, you want Jeb Bush or somebody like that. I said, no, I want him. About 5 or 10 years before that, we were listening to the president of South Korea. And they're like, why the hell listen to that? Because I was going there for work.
Are you an engineer?
Yes.
Let me just point this out.
Yeah.
I just want to point this out. I come from an entire family of engineers, okay? And not me. They must have dropped me on my head. Everybody in my family is an engineer. But I remember I remember asking my dad who's Italian, devout Catholic, I've never heard him swear in my life. And I said, Dad, what is it about engineering? I asked my dad, who do you like? He goes, Donald Trump. I was like, what? And I said, well, what is it about engineers and Trump? And he goes, oh, that's easy. We want to blow things up and start all over again. Is that you?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we can talk.
Yeah.
But one of the things I noticed years before, that there was somebody who was talking about South Korea. He was the president of South Korea, and he was talking about, if we do all our buildings and this and that, our output is going this and that. I said, wow, he sounds like the CEO of South Korea Corporation. We need something like that in the government, somebody who actually can spell business.
Yeah.
Because, you can tax a company at 100%, you're going to get zero in return. So you got to realize that. You got to realize where business is coming from. And one of the things I'm concerned about, manufacturing, where we actually make things with our little paws, we make things. We understand there's a smartness to doing that helps invoke practicality. And I think we've lost a lot of the practicality when we ship stuff out, all our manufacturing out, to buy cheap stuff at Walmart.
Oh, yeah. And so yesterday, I spent 8 hours in a 120-degree steel mill in Braddock, Pennsylvania. It was the best day ever. Just to watch those men and women just love what they do. And it's my third trip to a steel mill. I'm going to another one on Friday. But manufacturing is taking a really interesting turn in Western Pennsylvania. There's a real focus on the skills gap and the trades that I think is sort of the opposite of what happened in the 70s. In the 70s, we were encouraged to go to college, not to trade school, not to take shop. Now it's completely reversed itself. And well, a lot of people are like screaming about AI. Honestly, AI is going to give the working class the best jobs. The working class will be the plumber, the electrician, the welder. These are going to be the pillars of our community. These are going to be the money makers. These are going to be the people and their children that rebuild our churches and our communities. And the white collar job is the one that's in most jeopardy. Yeah, so don't buy into all this. Like I go on Facebook and yes, of course we need to mitigate concerns, right? Make sure the water is safe. Make sure the sound isn't, interrupts people's lives. But nothing was sadder than not hearing the hum of J&L coming down 2nd Avenue when I was in my 20s and it was gone. You knew that sound meant work. That sound means work.
There was rumors that the shooter had offshore bank accounts and might have been connected with offshore interests. Do you have any information on that? And would you like to guess what career I'm from?
Same, engineers. Blow everything up. No. I mean, I did do a lot of work on Thomas Crooks. There's a lot we don't know. And when we don't know things, that's filled in with all kinds of speculation. I do know this was a young man that was on a great trajectory until November of 2023. And then, according to his father, everything fell apart. And any of us who have children here know that when something falls apart with our kids, two things happen. We want to fix it, and we're embarrassed. And I suspect that's what happened with that young man. He was Jewish. Well, you'll read it in the book. He was exhibiting behavior that was completely unlike him. We don't know if there were outside influences or not, but I don't know if we'll ever know. We still don't know what happened in Las Vegas.
Recently, 2 people injured there have decided to sue the government.
Injured?
In Butler.
Oh, okay.
So, it begs the question about security that day. And not that you could have a completely secure space anywhere, but these breaches in security, the most recent at the dinner in D.C., that keeps happening to Trump, you do start to wonder, why can't we not get it better? And do you have any thoughts about that day and security yourself?
Well, the biggest problem with that day is there's 2 different universes of people, footprints of people that cover presidents. The ones that cover sitting presidents and the ones that cover former presidents. And then there's 3, and then there's ones that cover the nominee of the party. Trump was not yet the nominee. He was the former president. And I remember bringing this up and writing about this in the Trib about Obama. Like, I thought he has a really small footprint around him, but he wasn't the nominee yet. Now, when he became the nominee, that changed. So I think that they changed that role, but that was a Secret Service White House role. So that was why there was a smaller footprint that day. The other big problem that day was they weren't communicating with each other. which is like, what was the biggest lesson we learned from 9/11? Like, I mean, that's why we created Homeland Security, so everybody would talk to each other. But they don't.
I have a question about what you think is going on with election integrity, especially after what just happened in California.
The what?
Election integrity.
Oh, so
Happened in California.
we should vote one day. Period. It should be a holiday. Everybody has a day off and you go vote. That's it. That's full stop. That's it. That's what we should do. All of these other things are ridiculous. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. You mentioned something about being rooted, and we aren't so much rooted anymore. Maybe something along those lines. And it reminded me of what a friend told
Well,
me.
we are rooted, but the people that run our cultural curating, media, these are very transient people, the placeless. They move around.
So I remember about 10 years ago talking with a friend who was in his 60s. I would have been like in my 30s at the time. And he said, you should plant your flag somewhere. And that phrase stood out to me. And I didn't actually quite know what to make of it, because I think at the time my identity was in ideas.
Yeah.
I need to make my mark in this or that sphere of ideas. And it made me move around. I was kind of placeless, looking for my calling. And in the past 10 years, I've thought about what he said, and I've become more rooted myself. And I've been teaching my kids this. So whenever I was growing up, it was, what's your calling? What do you want to be? Go do that.
Yeah.
Go anywhere. Go to school anywhere.
Right.
Get a job anywhere.
Yeah.
Move to Alaska if you have to, if that's where you're going to get the maximum pay for whatever it is you want to do in your life. And I've started to question that the past 10 years. And so now my kids have just graduated from high school. And I'm telling them very different things.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, actually, it's important to be part of a community. And it's important to be part of a local church family. It's important to be near your family. These are things that matter. And it took me a long time to learn these things,
Yeah.
and a lot of pain and suffering. And I think there's a lot of people who are my age who were told that.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to be happy. This
Yeah.
is the way to be happy. Go out and maximize your earning potential or
Yeah.
something like that. And so I have a question. Is this idea of unfettered pursuit of career or calling, is that changing? Because that's what I saw in my generation.
Yeah, you see, so there was a Harvard study a couple months ago that shows that young people, millennials, more than any other generation, are now living closer to where they grew up than the generation before them. So they're learning the lessons of their parents and their grandparents, and they're coming back. Now, again, Pennsylvania's a little bit different. We don't live far from where we grew up, not all that far. Most of us still have Sunday dinner together, right? Most of us belong to the same church that our family. My parents are 90. I'm at dinner with them every Sunday, or there is hell to be paid. And I'm glad. Like, it was annoying when I was in my 20s and a teenager, but honestly, I'm so grateful for it. And I taught my children that, and my grandchildren. I think it was a mindset when you were growing up. Go, get out. And now we're saying, well, maybe we don't need to get out. Maybe home is okay. I have just recently found out, doing a story, I work for the Washington Examiner and Daily, and then the Washington Post. Can you believe they hired me? It's hilarious. I'm doing I did a story on, it's not published yet, on the Forbes Road. Forbes Road is one of the most important roads in the entire history of our country that changed everything in the French and Indian War. It also ended up being the place where George Washington came back in the 1770s. And it has been the great connector between the East Coast and the West ever since. And I started following the road from Bedford Springs to Pittsburgh and retracing what into Ligonier. It's been like a religious experience to be able to walk on those same footsteps and be able to go in those same places. But I also found out that my family has basically lived on that same road for 268 years. I mean, talk about like, we don't leave. We don't leave, not the Italian side, but my Scots and my German side, yeah. So since the McJunkin family, which lived on Forbes Road, and then went to Butler. Well, his sons did, one of his sons did, one of the founding families of Butler. But yeah, I found out that I live on in Westmoreland County, I live on the original tract of Forbes Road. I'm like, well, look at that. We never leave. Good. Oh, this young lady right there.
It's obvious that Trump has a tremendous amount of respect for you and would listen to you if you gave him some advice. And he's done so many phenomenal things, but then he turns a lot of people off when he does things like trying to take Greenland. If you could talk him into doing this diplomatically.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. He was never going to take Greenland, and he always loved playing everybody by making it seem like that. Like, that's the joke. That is the joke.
And then also, he thinks Rodriguez is so wonderful, but she still has 400 people that she has in prison. Tell them, I'm doing a lot of goodies by doing stupid things like
I don't think as a reporter I can say that.
I have to get off my chest.
Go ahead.
I wanted to thank you for your work. In 2016, the morning after the election, I woke up and thought, what the heck has happened? Much different feeling than I had in 2020. And then I read your book, The Bridge and Bowl. And I guess I would be a King Cyrus Christian.
Ah, yes. That was my favorite chapter. That's with those 4 guys in Iowa. Yep.
The in-depth nature that Brad taught, I believe you're correct.
Yeah.
You went through to write that book was amazing. So I highly all go on Amazon and look for Butler.
Yeah, all right, everybody pick their phone up right now. Order Butler. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, we've been doing this for 20 years. That's the first standing ovation. It really is, right? Right? Truly, truly. That was fantastic. I knew it would be. Just how this hits so close to home, right? For me, growing up in Butler. I mean, the moment that it happened, my next door neighbor, Bob, texted me and said, quote, can you freaking believe this, right? It's in our hometown, right? And my cousin Drew, who is at the Butler VA, he's the youngest person there. He was quarterback for the high school at New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Thank you. Yeah, yes. Jeff knows Jeff, and he went to the first Gulf War, has Gulf War syndrome, and he's really disabled. But he texted me to say that the entire entourage just flew past the Butler VA, which is about a mile down the road from it. And it's the same VA where Rick Santorum's parents met and worked when Rick Santorum grew up in Butler and went to Butler High School. And further, how close to home it is, when Thomas Crooks was brought up in one of my classes at Grove City about 2 years ago, the girl who sits about in the middle off to the left said that she sat next to him in class at their high school in Bethel Park. Yeah, and they knew each other. And I said, well, wow, what? Come on, tell me, speak. What would you? And she said, yeah, he was just, kind of a normal kid, quiet, and it completely freaks me out that happened. So it's crazy. All right, take these with you, and note that the next talk that we have coming up, it's going to be another really good one, September 8th, Dr. Jason Edwards, who's one of our best professors at Grove City College, professor of history for, I think, at least 20 years now. talking about the West, the Wild West, and we've never done a talk on the West before. So really looking forward to that. And then we have Judge David Porter, Grove City grad, class of '88, speaking on the Declaration of Independence and constitutional interpretation. Wanted to get that in by the end of 2026, right, for the 250th anniversary. So take these with you, and I think Salena will be around for a little bit if you want to say hi to her. Thank you all for coming. Take care.